The following broadcast is brought to you by A.C.T, Agora Center of Thought. Here only on the Voluntary Virtues Network. Every Saturday, 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join us on the dark side of radio. Agora, Anarchy, Action. Thank you for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Agora Underground here on the Voluntary Virtues Network. As you know, we're live every Saturday, 8 to 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. I am Comrade Dick, your host for the show. Do appreciate you guys coming back on. Welcome, new Agorists, new Libertarians, Anarcho-Capitalists, Objectivists, any kind of freedom lover in general without adjectives, right? Anarchists without adjectives. Just welcome. And we've been getting into theory, guys. We've been getting into applying theory consistently. We have been going through Samuel Edward Konkin's New Libertarian Manifesto, and we read chapter 2 last week, and we really got into a lot of the knickknacks about private arbitration, if you recall, and some of the costs and retrieving material that has been stolen. For example, there is the restitution of the item itself, right? If someone gets busted taking a car, for example, well, guess what? You have to pay for the car, right? I mean, if it's damaged, if you sold it off, if you totaled it, you got to pay for that, right? This is one of the factors in restitution. And true arbitration, private arbitration, right? You have the time preference factor that Konkin brought up, that this is something, I guess, that is specifically Austrian economic as far as time preference. There is a time preference to things. We would rather have the end result, right? The product now. We would rather have the product of our labor now than in the future. And the only reason we would be willing to postpone receiving a finished product, and the only reason we would postpone that into the future would be because that future good is actually worth more to us than the present good. So if you take someone's car and the amount of time that they're having to do without, well, that's a factor in it as well. If their insurance, if their arbiter needs to cover a rent-a-car, right? That's going to have to be part of your expenses as the thief of the vehicle. And then we had the cost of actual apprehension, what it costs to investigate, what it costs to retrieve the material, what it costs to for the private arbitration services themselves. These are all factors that someone in a free society who has been labeled, who has been convicted of a crime, right, who's been proven to be guilty of a crime, would have to pay for these things in order to bring back proper restitution. Now, as Konkin brought up, this is where agorism really splits off with, David Friedman and Murray Rothbard on their analysis. Not only did they include these three costs, apprehension, time costs, and the actual restitution of the item, but they also added on a punishment fee, if you will. They believe that you needed to discourage thieves from engaging in theft, and the only way to do this would be to have a what would you call it? A punishment, right? I mean, essentially a fine above and beyond these three costs here. That would be an extra incentive, right? A negative incentive to want to engage in theft. Now, Konkin brings up a really valid point with this, is that as agorists, we don't believe that punishment is part of the libertarian theory, right? Libertarianism is only concerned with making things right that have been wronged, right? Making amends. And, let God and conscience, as Konkin puts it, let God and conscience convict bad thoughts and bad actions. So long as the victim has been brought to a position of full restitution, there really is no issue to be had, right? A couple points here that I personally disagreed with Konkin. The fact that some people might want to return items because they're offered some kind of reward or something of the sort. I don't know if maybe he was implying something that I didn't fully grasp, but I just don't see insurance companies offering rewards for returned misplaced goods, lost goods, stolen goods, without doing further inquiry as to whether this person receiving the reward is guilty of taking the item. I mean, how convenient, right, to be able to just take something from your neighbor and then just wait till the reward comes out, and then, oh, look what I found. I found this on the on the street. So that I thought that was kind of interesting, a little bit off point, a little bit. I don't see that fully functioning in a private society as far as rewards being incentivized to return items and goods. Maybe maybe things that can be replaced. Maybe whether animals, right, pets, children, human beings, relatives, loved ones. All these things are obviously cannot be replaced, right? A human life, once it's extinguished, is gone forever, and you can't replace that. So in those cases, I mean, definitely rewards are more common, though usually from the people doing the hijacking, people doing the when they steal your ass, when they so sometimes words, like, I get these brain farts and like words just leave my mind. But regardless, and another point that I thought was a little bit off point was the idea that somehow pacifists, people that don't want arbitration to be enforced against people that hurt them specifically, how they might be still covered in a free society. I don't see how that would work, right? If your insurance company, if your arbiter couldn't seek restitution from the actual culprit, from the actual criminal involved, then they're at a disadvantage. They're at an economic loss to cover your goods, because there's no way that they can ever retrieve the cost of them if they were ever stolen, right? What would keep insurance fraud from occurring at this plane, at this level? You could easily just get your friend to steal something from you, and your private company reimburses you for the cost of it, and they don't prosecute. They don't go up against anybody. They don't investigate to find out who took it. It seems kind of, and if you're a pacifist anyway, there's really no purpose for you to have insurance, right? I mean, you're kind of leaving things up to karma and the fate and the universe and God, right? So I don't see the reason for a pacifist to even have many of these services. So that's the only other thing that I really found issue with chapter 2, Agorism, our means, or our goal. I'm sorry, Agorism, our goal. We're heading into chapter 3, Counter Economics, our means, and we had like a couple paragraphs left here on chapter 2. I'll go ahead and start reading. But other than that, really sorry for the cutout there on the last transmission. We're getting new equipment. The show, as time goes on, will be updated, and hopefully we'll have a green screen and some more, out and about reporting and news sourcing and whatnot. So we'll be bringing that to you as time goes along and resources allow us to. But here, continuing on, we had just finished reading about essentially Rothbard and Friedman having this necessity for a punishment factor, if you will. And he's continuing on here about the criticism of Agora's restoration. He says that even so, this criticism of Agora's restoration fails to note that there is an entropy factor. The potential aggressor must put the gain of the object of theft against the loss of the object plus interest plus apprehension costs. It is true that if he turns himself in immediately, the latter two are minimal. But so are the costs to the victim and the insurer. Not only is Agora's restoration happily deterrent in a reciprocal relation with compliance, but the market cost of the apprehension factor allows a precise quantifiable measurement of the social cost of coercion in society. No other proposed system known to this time does that. As most libertarians have been saying, freedom does work. Nowhere in Agora's restoration theory do the thoughts of the aggressor enter into the picture. The aggressor is assumed only to be a human actor and responsible for his actions, of course. Furthermore, what business is it of you or anyone else what anyone thinks? What is relevant is what the aggressor does. Thought is not action, and thought, at least, anarchy remains absolute. If you sit up in shock to find I have crashed through your picture window and then made sure everyone will continue to live, you don't particularly care if I tripped and fell through while walking by, or if I engaged in some act of irrational anger jumping through, or even whether it was a premeditated plan to distract protectors across the street from noticing a bank heist. What you want is your window back pronto and the mess cleared. What I think is irrelevant to your restoration. In fact, it can be easily demonstrated that even the smallest expenditure of energy on this subject is pure waste. Motivation or suspected motivation, which is all we can know, may be relevant to detection and even to prove plausibility of the aggressor's actions to an arbiter if there may be two equally probable suspects. But all that really matters for justice, as a libertarian sees it, is that the victim has been restored to a condition as identical as possible to pre-harm. Let God and conscience punish guilty thoughts. Another objection raised concerns what will be done about violence initiators who have paid their debt to the individual, not society, mind you, and are free to try again with greater experience. What about recidivism, so prevalent in status society today, right? We see this all the time. I mean, people get punished, put in a cage for breaking some victimless arbitrary law, and they end up receding back into the red market, right? The criminal culture. They learn how to live by thieving and stealing and killing and pillaging, right? How to live by the criminal hand instead of the economic hand. And this is a sad factor of our prison system, our court system, our justice system, right? This is what statism inevitably leads to. It's just a bunch of people getting put in cages, and no one's property or life or damage is being restored anyway. You end up having to call your insurance, even with the state involved. So let's move that along and privatize everything, right? Let's get this private law society going. So he says here that, of course, once one is marked as an aggressor, one will probably be watched more closely and thought of first when a similar crime is committed in the vicinity, right, in the geographical area. And while work camps may be used to repay restitution in a few extreme cases, most aggressors will be allowed to work in a relative freedom on a sort of bond. Thus, no institutions of criminal higher learning like prisons will be around to educate and encourage aggression. This is such a really good point. The fact that prisons themselves most likely would not even exist in a free society. For people that really, really, really needed to pay, massive amounts of restitution back, and in extreme cases can be put in labor camps until their debt's fully paid off. Right? I mean, if you stole, I don't know, a couple $100,000 from a bank or something. I mean, I really don't know. I mean, how you could accumulate such wealth, right? If you get caught burning someone's house down or something of the sort. Yeah, I mean, that's going to take you a couple years of paying that off, right? In order to pay back your damages to that individual victim. This is kind of neat because you don't need to put somebody in a cage where, like Honkin brought up, the victim, right? The person that got their stuff stolen from, their house burned down, they have to pay taxes in order to keep the criminal, right, fed and sheltered. Come on now, give me a break. Give me a break. In a free society, I mean, people would have to, they could relatively still be free, but you would have to be paying such and such a month, right, in order to make your restitution. And if not, then people's contracts will end up defaulting on your ass, right? Because you're not paying back your share of damages. I mean, you will be looked on as a criminal, as a somebody to be untrustworthy and not even willing to make amends for their wrongs. You'll be ostracized in society. And we all know it's living on your own, living in the wilderness isn't really too beneficial. So he finishes it up here, this second chapter. He says that the distinguishing characteristic of a highly effective and accurate system of judgment and protection will be that it will occupy a negligible fraction of an individual's time, thought, or money. One can then argue that we have not portrayed 99% of the Agora society at all. What about the elimination of self-destruction, which libertarianism does not deal with? Space exploration and colonization, life extension, intelligence increase, interpersonal relations, and aesthetic variations. All that really can and need be said is that we are present. Man must spend half or more of his time and energy serving or resisting the state. That time energy, the physicist's definition of action, will be usable for all other aspects of self-improvement and the harnessing of nature. It takes a cynical view of humanity indeed to imagine anything but a richer, happier society. This then is a sketch of our goal and a detailed picture or enlarged focus on the aspects of Dutch justice and protection. We have the here and the there. Now for the path, counter economics. And we're going to get into power and market. We're going to read some Rothbard after we finish this up. Still debating whether we're going to go through the Agora's class theory or not right after this, or jump into power and market. I'm sorry, but power and market is Rothbard's treatise on private society, how private arbitration and private law could theoretically, logically, and very effectively function. So I would be very much interested in reading that with you guys. Hopefully by then we'll have a text on the screen and whatnot, because I couldn't even find this NLM online. Seems a lot of the links are kind of off there, but I'm sure they're getting them updated. Anyhow, so we got a couple pages here that we're gonna kill out. We're gonna read through chapter 3, New Libertarian Manifesto, Counter Economics as Our Means. Oh man, some good kombucha. Not drinking the usual craft brew tonight, but I'm drinking some kombucha, lightly fermented tea with fruit and whatnot, ginger. Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Definitely give it a shot. It's supposed to be good for your gut. But so anyway, he starts off here talking about counter economics. Konkin starts off, having detailed our past and status present and glimpsed a credible view of a far better society achievable with present understanding and technology, no change in human nature needed, we come to the critical part of the manifesto. How do we get from here to there? The answer breaks into two naturally, or maybe unnaturally. Without a state, the differentiation into micro, and that is the manipulation of the individual by himself in his environment, including the market, and the macro, the manipulation of the collectives, would be at best an interesting statistical exercise with some small references to marketing agencies. Even so, a person with highly sophisticated decency may wish to understand the social consequences of his or her acts, even if they harm no other. With the state tainting every act and befouling our minds with unearned guilt, it becomes extremely important to understand the social consequences of our acts. For example, if we fail to pay a tax and get away with it, who is hurt? Us, the state, innocents? Libertarian analysis shows us that the state is responsible for any damage to innocence it alleges the selfish tax evader has incurred, and the services the state provides us are illusory. But even so, there must be more than lonely resistance cleverly concealed or dropping out. If a political party or revolutionary army is inappropriate and self-defeating for libertarian goals, what collective action would work? The answer is agorism. It is possible, practical, and even profitable to entrepreneur large collections of humanity from status society to the Agora. This is, in the deepest sense, true revolutionary activity, and will be covered in the next chapter. But to understand this macro answer, we must first outline the micro. And yeah, what more revolutionary act can you do than to get a cop to quit his public job and actually contribute to the market? You know, actually become a private security guard or something. Actually provide a service instead of living off loot and pirating. Street pirates, right? Nothing but street pirates just going around looking for victimless crimes to enforce. Why don't you actually protect someone's property? That would be a revolutionary act if you can get a cop to quit being a public servant. And make his way into the Agora and actually become part of the division of labor versus the division of plunder. Imagine a military guy, right? If you can convince some military personnel to get the hell out of the army and join the market in some way or fashion, what more revolutionary act can you ask for? That is the most revolutionary thing someone can do. I mean, that is beautiful. That's badass. This is what we need to learn to do, ladies and gentlemen. We need to learn to articulate our ideas in such a way, being bold and energizing out there when we go out to talk to people, and be articulate and precise, and bring that conviction to people's hearts and minds. I mean, if we can illustrate the state for what it is, that's going to say enough. People that live off of the political class will feel their conviction, hopefully their conscience, right? We'll be nagging at them, and hopefully we can get revolution to come about in their hearts and minds. But I digress. We continue. The function of the pseudoscience of establishment economics, even more than making predictions like the Imperial Roman augurs for the ruling class, their other objective is to mystify and confuse the ruled class as to where their wealth is going and how it is taken from them. An explanation of how people keep their wealth and property from the state is then counter-establishment economics, or counter-economics for short. The actual practice of human actions that evade, avoid, and defy the state is counter-economic activity. But in the same sloppy way, economics refers both to the science and of what it studies, and counter-economics will undoubtedly be used. Since this writing is counter-economic theory itself, what will be referred to as counter-economics is the practice. Mapping and describing all or even a significantly useful part of counter-economics will require at least a full volume itself. Just enough will be sketched here to provide understanding for the rest of the manifesto. Going from an Agora society to a statist one should be uphill work, equivalent to a path of high negative entropy in physics. After all, once one is living in and understanding a well-run free society, why would one wish to return to systematic coercion, plunder, and anxiety? Spreading ignorance and irrationality among the knowledgeable and rational is difficult. Mystifying that which is already clearly understood is nearly impossible. The Agora society should be fairly stable relative to decadence, though highly open to improvement. Let us run backwards in time, therefore, like running a film backwards from the Agora society to the present statist society. What would we expect to see? Pockets of statism, mostly contiguous in territory, since the state requires regional monopolies, would first appear. The remaining victims are becoming more and more aware of the wonderful free world around them and the evaporating from these pockets. Large syndicates of market protection agencies are containing the state by defending those who have signed up for protection insurance. Most importantly, those outside of the statist pockets or sub-societies are enjoying an Agora society, save for a higher cost of insurance premiums and some care as to where they travel. The Agoras could coexist with statists at this point, maintaining an isolationist foreign policy, since the cost of invasion of statist sub-societies and liberation would be higher than the immediate return, unless, of course, the state launches an all-out last aggression. But there is no real reason to imagine the remaining victims will choose to remain oppressed when the libertarian alternative is so visible and accessible. The state's areas are like a supersaturated solution, ready to precipitate anarchy. Now run backwards another step, and we find the situation reversed. We find larger sections of society under statist control, and smaller ones living as agorically as possible. However, there is one visible difference. The Agorists need not be territorially contiguous. They can live anywhere, though they will tend to associate with their fellow Agorists not only for social reinforcement, but for ease of and profitability of trade. It's always safer and more profitable to deal with more trustworthy customers and suppliers. The tendency is for greater association among more Agorist individuals and for disassociation with more statist elements. This tendency is not only theoretically strong, it already exists in embryonic practice today. Some easily definable territories, perhaps in space or islands in the ocean, or under the ocean, or big city ghettos, may be almost entirely Agorist, where the state is impotent to crush them. But most Agorists will live within statist-claimed areas. And he's doing the reversal here. He's kind of like bringing it back from a free society to a statist society, and how that would go about happening in order to replay it, if you will, right? And we can see what the proper steps here would be to getting an Agora society going. How do we bring about, right? How do we truly bring about anarchy? We know that voting isn't definitely going to work, right? People don't vote away their livelihood. The people don't give back what they've stolen. So I really do think this is the answer. This is the answer, folks. I really do. So he continues on here that there will be a spectrum of the degree of agorism in most individuals, as there is today, with a few benefiting from the state being highly statist, and a few fully conscious of the agorist alternative and competent as living free to the hilt, and the rest, of course, the majority of society, in the middle with varying degrees of confusion. Finally, we step back to where only a handful understand agorism, the vast majority perceiving illusory gains from the existence of the state are unable to perceive an alternative. And the statists themselves, the government apparatus, and the class defined by receiving a new gain from the state's intervention in the market. This is a description of our present society. We are home. Before we reverse course and describe the path from statism to agorism, let us look around at our present society with our newly acquired agorist perception. Much as a traveler who returns home and sees things anew in a new light from what he or she has learned from foreign lands and ways of life, we may gain new insights in our present circumstances. Besides a few enlightened new libertarians tolerated in the more liberal statist areas of the globe, toleration exists to the degree of libertarian contamination of statism. We now perceive something else. Large numbers of people who are acting in an agorist manner with little understanding of any theory, but who are induced by material gain to evade, avoid, or defy the state. Surely they are a hopeful potential. In the Soviet Union, a bastion of arch statism and a nearly totally collapsed official economy, a giant black market provided the Russians, Armenians, Ukrainians, and others with everything from food to television repair to official papers and favors from the ruling class. As the Guardian Weekly reports, Burma is almost a total black market, with the government reduced to an army, police, and a few struggling politicians. In varying degrees, this is true of nearly all the second and third worlds. What of the first world? In the social democratic countries, the black market is smaller because the white market of legally accepted market transactions is larger. But the former is still quite prominent. Italy, for example, has a problem of a large part of its civil services which works officially from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. and working unofficially at various jobs the rest of the day, earning black money. The Netherlands has a large black market in housing because of high regulation of this industry. Denmark has a tax evasion movement so large that those in it, seduced to politics, have formed the second largest party. And these are only the grossest examples that the press has been able or willing to cover. Currency controls are evaded rampantly. In France, for example, everyone is assumed to have a large gold stash, and trips to Switzerland for more than touring and skiing are commonplace. And this really brings up an important aspect of rational human action. I mean, when someone is left with the choice of giving away their hard-earned labor and wealth and material gains to a bunch of parasitical political pundits and the political class, I mean, what are people rationally left to do? You think what, we're just going to hand over our shit? I mean, That is not going to work. I mean, we're human beings, for crying out loud. We have brains, we have reason. You haven't chemically lobotomized us yet. We're going to do what we can to resist you, and we're going to do what we can to keep our own, right? Because it is our own, and we have the universal claim to it. You don't. So, I mean, the fact that people engage in counter-economic activity almost on a daily level, it doesn't surprise me at all. This is just part of human action, right? We realize this as libertarians and agorists, as objectivists, right? Human beings are selfish. And as much as you tell them that giving away their hard-earned wealth to a bunch of bureaucrats is somehow, the altruistic, loving thing to do, people aren't going to stick to that. People aren't going to live that. That's not the way we are built. That's not the way we are wired. We are wired to hold and to manage the things we have rightfully earned, the things we have produced, the things we've traded. These are ours alone. So it's really no surprise to me that counter-economic activity is so rampant around the world. I mean, how many, right? I mean, how many, even like major white market businesses? I mean, how many of them? You think everybody writes off everything they're supposed to write off on their tax forms? I think everyone declares everything. I mean, come on now. We're all trying to do our best to maintain the hard-earned wealth and produce that we own. So it's just it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It really is. I'm going to continue on here because this is I'm getting excited here. So you need to engage. We need you to engage in counter-economics. But to really appreciate the extent of this counter-economic activity, one must view the relatively free capitalist economies. Let's look at the black and gray markets in North America. And remember, this is the case of lowest activity in the world today. According to the American Internal Revenue Service, at least 20 million people belong in the underground economy of tax evaders using cash to avoid detections of transactions or barter exchange. Millions keep money in gold or in foreign accounts to avoid the hidden taxation of inflation. Millions, illegal aliens, illegal in quotations, right, are employed according to the Immigration and Naturalization Services. Millions more deal or consume marijuana and other proscribed drugs, including Adderall and forbidden medical material. And there are all the practitioners of victimless crimes. Besides drug use, there is, of course, prostitution, pornography, bootlegging, false identification papers, gambling, and prescribed sexual conduct between consenting adults. Regardless of reform movements to gain political acceptance of these acts, the populace has chosen to act now, and by so doing are creating, in effect, the counter economy. It doesn't stop here, though. Since the 55-mile-per-hour speed limit enacted federally in the U.S., most Americans have become counter-economic drivers. The trucking industry has developed CB communications to evade state enforcement of regulations. For independents who can make 4 runs at 75 rather than 3 runs at 55, counter-economic driving is a question of survival. This is hilarious. This is hilarious here. I remember I took a trip to Mexico with my uncle, who, we were talking on the drive over about anarchy. And, it was hilarious because this same situation came up. He's in there telling me in the car, oh, no. We need people to, set the rules and enforce the rules over society, or else people are just going to go crazy and rampant. And we need to follow these rules because they know what's best for us. The typical statist dribble. And I look over at his speedometer and I'm like, uncle, think you're going like 15 miles an hour over the speed limit. You know, about 25 kilometers over the speed limit. What's up with that? Oh yeah, well, well, we can drive faster, blah blah blah. You know, it's like, well, wait. I thought you just said those rules were for our benefit, and we need to follow them. And there needs to be people in charge setting rules. I mean, come on now. And I'm not even against. I mean, we're not even against speed limits, right? I mean, we know that private roads and private road companies have a right to set speed limits if that's the way society decides to go with the roads. But I just thought it was hilarious, right? I mean, so we all engage, even strong statist supporters, and at some degree engage in avoiding full compliance to all the regulations, right? They don't do it. They don't do it. So, and this is really cool here, where he points out that CB radio communications, are essentially all that. I don't know the lingo, but I mean all the trucker lingo, right? We got brown bear, blah blah blah, grizzly bear down the street, blah blah. I mean, it's like they're all communicating to each other and letting each other know where the speed traps are, where all the cops are stationed at, because these truckers, right, are getting paid by the amount of deliveries that they do. And if you can fit two more deliveries in your weekly schedule because you decide to go 15, 20 miles an hour over the speed limit, then guess what? You just economically gained, right? You took that risk for economic benefit and you were successful. So welcome to the counter economy. The ancient customs of smuggling thrives today from boatloads of marijuana and foreign appliances with high tariffs, and truckloads of people from less developed countries to the tourist stashing of a little extra in the luggage and not reporting it to custom agencies. Very good point. I mean, Chinese goods have huge tariffs in China. Chinese goods have huge tariffs in Mexico, and people are smuggling them in. It's contraband. They're selling Chinese electronics that they didn't pay tariffs on. We all hide, that bottle of whiskey in our panties, right, and wrap them up in our boxers or something when we're going through customs. We all wrap that foreign candy or whatever the hell. You know what I'm saying? Don't declare it. So we're all living it. We're all living in anarchy. We just need to accept it, already. We need to accept ourselves and come to terms with who we really are. You just need to accept yourself and be proud. Be proud. Stand tall. Keep your chin up. Nearly everyone engages in some sort of misrepresentation or misdirection on their tax forms. Off the books payments for services, unreported trade with relatives, and illegal sexual positions with their mates. To some extent, then, everybody is a counter-economist. And this is predictable from libertarian theory. Nearly every aspect of human action has statist legislation prohibiting, regulating, or controlling it. These laws are so numerous that Libertarian Party, which prevents any new legislation and briskly repealed 10 or 20 laws a session, would not have sufficiently repealed the state, let alone the mechanism itself, for at least a millennia. That's a freaking good point. We have so many regulations and laws on the books that, I mean, how long would we be reforming and taking this to, to vote in order to get all these regulations and laws off the books? I mean, we would be in session forever. How long does it take to debate on one little issue? Right? Can you imagine somehow our way of politically voting and easing away the state? Give me a break. We're gonna be here longer than the Third Reich was supposed to last, right? We're ridiculous. Come on, people. We gotta use some logic here. There is no There is no working with the system. We know this. There's just too many laws. They're too entrenched in society, right? We'd have to get rid of whole books here at a time with hundreds and hundreds of regulations and laws, in order to make any kind of substantial difference. But he continues on here that obviously the state is unable to obtain enforcement of its edicts, yet the state continues. And if everyone is somewhat counter-economic, why hasn't the counter-economy overwhelmed the regular economy? Good questions. Outside of North America, we can add the effect of imperialism. The Soviet Union has received support from the more developed countries in the 1930s and large quantities of instruments of violence during World War II. Even today, trade heavily subsidized by non-repayable loans props up the Soviet and the new Chinese regimes. This capital or anti-capital being destructive of value flow together with military aid from both blocs maintains regimes in the rest of the globe. But that does not explain the North American case. What exists everywhere on earth, allowing the state to continue, is the sanction of the victim. Every victim of statism has eternalized the state to some degree. The IRS's annual proclamation that the income tax depends on voluntary compliance is ironically true. Should the taxpayers completely cut off the blood supply, the vampire state would helplessly perish. Its unpaid police and army deserting almost immediately. And this would, of course, derange the monster. If everyone abandoned legal tender for gold and goods and contracts and other exchanges, it is doubtful that even taxation could support and sustain the modern state. This is a very good point because with taxation, of course, we all recognize that taxes are what keep the government bills paid, right? But at the same time, if we continue to allow them to have a legitimate central bank and have a monopoly over currency, then they don't really need our taxes, right? They can just keep printing fiat paper money and pay off their goons with that. And of course, those goons are going to keep doing their job because, hey, this money is accepted as legal tender. But if businesses, if we as a society gave up, abandoned this fiat, so-called legal tender for gold, silver, goods, contracts, Bitcoin, anything, any alternative, how could they survive, right? We need to get them we need to go right for the Achilles heel. We got to stick the stake right in their heart, right? And that's the central bank. That's the Federal Reserve. That's the money supply. That's what keeps the grind going, right? Military personnel are shooting people across the world or bombing and drone striking because that pays the bills, right? Police officers keep brutalizing and keep sticking people in jail and giving people fines for victimless crimes because it keeps the bills paid. And so long as we continue to accept this crap ass fiat currency, we're going to legitimize them. We're going to give them a foothold, right, of existence. And this is why we need to encourage businesses, producers, right? Encourage people to trade in alternative currencies that don't involve Federal Reserve notes, right? So a lot easier said than done, but it's slowly happening. So this is where the state's control of education and the information media, either directly or through ruling class ownership, becomes crucial. In earlier days, the established priesthood serve the function to mystify the king and aristocracy, mystify the relations of oppression, and induce guilt in evaders and resistors. The disestablishment of religion has put this burden on the new intellectual class, what the Russians called the intelligentsia. Some intellectuals holding truth as their highest value, as did earlier dissenting theologians and clerics, do work at clarifying rather than mystifying, but they are dismissed or reviled and kept away from the state, from state and foundation controlled income. This is a phenomenon of dissidence and revisionism created, and thus is the attitude of anti-intellectualism generated among the populace who suspect or incompletely understand the function of the court intellectual. Very, very valid point. Very, very valid point. I mean, this is something Rothbard pointed out in his Anatomy of the State, right? The court intellectual, the court historian, the state academic, right? People in academia, people, so-called intellectuals, people in higher thinking circles, university level stuff. I mean, they're directly paid by the government, right? A lot of them are in public universities, public education boards and whatnot. You know, their studies and their whole livelihood is paid for by political grants, right? Government funding. So are they likely to call out the state and the state's atrocities and the state's, you know, inconsistencies with logic and reason and the human nature and the amount of brutality that's being caused by the state? Are they likely to cut their lifeline off? Or are they likely to do what every human being does, is try to live selfishly, live for themselves, right? This is a sad conundrum we're stuck in, ladies and gentlemen. We have literally half of society holding the other half hostage. So note that, note well how anarchist intellectuals are attacked and repressed under every state, and those arguing for an overthrow of the present ruling class, even only to replace it with another, are suppressed. Those who propose changes which eliminate some beneficiaries of the state and add others are often lauded by the benefiting elements of the higher circles and attacked by the potential losers. I mean, this is democracy, right? Group A and B teaming up against Group C, Group B and C teaming up against A, Group C and A teaming up against B. I mean, this is just the nature of democracy. It literally, society, special interest, holding the rest of society at hostage, at bay. It's a disgusting thing we're living in. I mean, this is supposed to be reason and rational, and the next, it's like what's been pointing out before, right? Monarchy was a lot better than democracy, and I'm not a monarchist. I don't believe in kings and having you know, sole rulers over nations. But even then, you're right, they had a better incentive to take care of their subjects and take care of their country. A way bigger and better incentive to do so than you know, a 4-year, 6-year, 8-year term politician who is in and out. I mean, who's more likely to take care of a house, right? Someone that owns it or someone that's renting it? Yeah, I mean, so continues on here that a common characteristic of most hardened black marketeers is their guilt. They wish to make their bundle and return to the straight society. Bootleggers and hookers all long someday for a reacceptance in society. And even when they form a supportive sub-society of outcasts. Yet there have been exceptions to this phenomena of longing for acceptance. the religious dissenting communities of the 1700s, the political utopian communities of the 1800s, and most recently, the counterculture of the hippies and the New Left. What they had was a convention that their sub-society, conviction, I'm sorry, what they had was a conviction that their sub-society was superior to the rest of society. The fearful reaction to themselves they generated in the rest of society was the fear that they were correct. All these examples of self-sustaining sub-societies failed for one overriding reason: ignorance of economics. No social binding, no matter how beautiful, can overcome the basic glue of society, the division of labor. The anti-market commune defies the only enforceable law, the law of nature. The basic organizational structure of society, above the family, is not the commune or the tribe or extended tribe or state, but the agora. No matter how many wish communism to work and devote themselves to it, it will fail. They can hold back agorism indefinitely by great effort, but when they let go, the flow or invisible hand or tides of history or profit incentive or doing what comes naturally or spontaneity will carry society inexorably closer to the pure agora. Why is there such resistance to eventual happiness? Psychologists have been dealing with that since they began their embryonic science. But we can at least give two broad answers when it comes to socioeconomic questions: internalization of anti-principles, those seeming like principles but actually contrary to natural law, and the opposition of vested interests. Now we can see clearly what is needed to create a libertarian society. On the one hand, we need the education of the libertarian activists and the consciousness raising of counter-economists to libertarian understanding and mutual supportiveness. We are right. We are better. We are surviving in a moral, consistent way. And we are building a better society of benefit to ourselves and others. Our counter-economic and counter groups might affirm. Note, libertarian activists who are not themselves practicing counter-economics are unlikely to be convincing. Libertarian political candidates undercut everything they say are of value by what they are doing. Some candidates have even held jobs in taxing bureaus and defense departments. And these are supposed libertarian candidates, right? What a joke. What a oxymoron hypocrisy, right? Oxymoronic hypocrisy. So on the other hand, we must defend ourselves against the vested interest, or at the very least, lower the oppression as much as possible. If we eschew reformist activity as counterproductive, how will we achieve that? One way is to bring more and more people into the counter economy and lower the plunder available to the state. But evasion isn't enough. How do we protect ourselves and even counterattack? Slowly but steadily, we will move to a free society, turning more counter-economists onto libertarianism and more libertarians onto counter-economics. Finally, integrating theory and practice. The counter-economy will grow and spread to the next step we saw in our trip backward, with an ever larger agorist sub-society embedded within the steady society. Some agorists may even condense into discernible districts and ghettos and predominate in islands or space colonies. At this point, the question of protection and defense will become important, ladies and gentlemen. And that's where we're at it for today. We are out of time, but we got about a page left here in chapter 3. And this is really good stuff. So, we need to become active in the counter economy. It doesn't happen overnight, right? We don't one can't just give up your white market job and all of a sudden become, successful and independent in the gray and in the black, right? This is gonna have to be a passion that supersedes your regular set schedule, right? You have to go to work, make money for the man, time being, so you can make money for yourself. And when you get home, you need to find ways that you can make money on the gray and on the black, mowing yards, taking care of kids, guitar lessons, computer work, programming, websites, art, chores for elderly people, working on cars. I mean, the list is endless, and it abounds and it abounds. And as you grow that, you can start to substitute your regular job with these counter economic activities, right? To where one day you can just, tell your boss, hey, I don't need to work here anymore. Putting in my 2 weeks, right? So hopefully you can start to put in your 2 weeks to being a slave, right? So let's all put in our 2 weeks and keep growing the Agora, ladies and gentlemen. Keep growing the underground economy. That way we have more people to trade with and more people to grow together with. So definitely been a pleasure, as it always is. Comrade Dick here, your host for the Agora Underground, only on Voluntary Virtues Network. And you guys stay tuned with the other shows here. And we'll be back next week. We're bringing it down and breaking it down like we usually do. So I do appreciate you guys for tuning in. Laissez-faire, Agora, anarchy, action. Peace out.